Hey, dethroners, welcome back to the Dethroning Your Inner Critic podcast. I am really excited for the conversation today. I have Dr. Laura Sicola. She is a cognitive linguist and an executive communication coach. And Dr. Laura's mission is to guide leaders in mastering the 3 C's of executive presence, which we will definitely talk about today. And she uses personalized and practical approaches to teach leaders how to project confidence, authority, and authenticity so they can be themselves while still getting through to anyone. So welcome to the show, Dr. Laura.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so I just want to dive right in with the 3 C's of executive presence. Can you tell me what that is, and how do you teach people to have the 3 C's?
What I love is the theme of this show, because they are very much intertwined. My 3 C's and the idea of dethroning your inner critic, because usually it's the inner voices in our minds that are stopping us from achieving those 3. And the 3 C's are very simply the ability to command the room, to connect with the audience, and to close the deal. And to break down what that means, the first one, the command the room, there's a difference between commanding respect, commanding attention, and demanding it. If you've got to demand it, you'll never command it.
Yes.
So what is it about the presence that we have, the way that we show up, the way we carry ourselves, the way that we speak, that just makes people sit up and take notice and focus on us?
Interesting.
That's the first.
Okay, good.
The second, to connect with the audience, is to establish some sort of rapport, no matter who they are, no matter what their perspective, what their needs, and what they're bringing to the table, where there's a mutual understanding that on some level, you understand me and I understand you. And we're going to move forward together.
Yes.
And the third, close the deal. This is not necessarily a sales kind of idea of signing on the dotted line and transferring money. It can be, but more often than not, it's not. It's about coming to an agreement together on next steps, how to just move the needle little by little so that you're making progress together. That's closing the deal. Maybe that agreement is, you know what, things are getting a little heated. Let's go get lunch. Let's come back with full bellies and clear heads and start over again with a different energy. Okay, that's closing a different kind of deal, but it's still a mutual agreement that'll be more productive in moving the conversation forward. If you can do all 3 of those, that's where you're golden. Okay.
All right. So I want to dive deeper into this. Okay. Let's just start with the commanding the room. Right.
Yep.
I have a program that I teach called the Confidence Cure. And one of the things that I talk about is that so many people believe that first I'm going to get the confidence, right? I'm going to get to this level where I can already command the room. And then, then I'll just go out and I'll command it, right? And I don't, at least in my experience and my experience working with thousands of people, I don't think that's really how it goes, right?
Not for most people. I would agree with that.
Not for most people. Okay. So tell me what you do when you're working with somebody that wants to command the room and wants to have that sense of presence, and they just have a lot of fear and doubt that's in their way. What do you say to that?
I think there's so many things that popped into my head with everything that you just so succinctly mentioned. The first is the mindset of your purpose. So why are you going to talk to those people? Most of us go in and where the inner critic voice gets really loud, really fast, is with what I call the death spiral of what if questions. What if I forget what I'm going to say? What if they don't like it? What if they ask a question that I can't answer? What if the earth opens up and swallows me whole? We have all these catastrophizing fears and thoughts of worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And we sort of envision the audience, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, to be some stereotypical sitcoms high school English teacher there with a red pen waiting to bleed all over our essays and just point out all of our flaws. And that's really not what anybody's there to do. I mean, there may be like one idiot who just likes to hear himself talk and sound smarter than everybody else. But the majority of the people in any audience are there with one unified purpose. What's in it for them? They're going in hopeful, just like everybody out there who's tuning into this show right now. They're not, and I would encourage everybody out there to just do a little quick mental self-assessment and say, wait, did I come in here waiting to see if Joanna's guest was even remotely useful or why it was a stupid choice for a guest, and to see if she's a fraud and to see if she really knows what she's talking about and to see where I can just shoot holes in all of her theories and to show that they're both dumb for having... No, of course not. You've got other things to do with your time. You joined this podcast. You tuned in because you trust that your host, that Joanna always brings in great value. You've gotten value out of it in the past and you want to get more value. And so you're coming in with I say this in a positive way, with a selfish interest, right? We want to get value. It's the what's in it for me. I want to get ROI, the return on the investment of my time. Yeah. And your audience, everybody out there who's speaking to somebody else, whoever you're speaking to wants the same thing. They want to know that you're giving them value. Yeah. So the shift needs to be coming in, not with a sense of defensiveness and fear, but to go in with an air of generosity. Where can you give value to your listeners? Yes. What do they need? How can you help them? How does the information that you have serve them? Where are you excited about it? Positive, negative? Is it a warning? Is it a guidance of some sort? But how can you serve them? And if you go in with a heart of enthusiastic service, everything changes.
Yes. And that's the connect too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what about the person that they have a purpose, they want to make an impact, they want to make a difference, but they've got this voice in their mind that says, really, what value am I bringing that, the thousands of other people out there that are also trying to bring value? What's different about what they've done versus what I'm doing? What new value am I really bringing to these people?
It always depends. And this is where I tease my clients that I'm going to preface these answers with the most annoying answer from any teacher ever, which is, it depends. Because it does. That's really the basis of everything that I teach. And I'm sure much of what you teach as well is that it depends. Well, they said this. Okay, well, why did they say that? What was the context? What had happened before they came in? Were they tired? Did they just get chewed out by somebody else? There's a million different things that could create the context, which warrants a slightly different tact, a slightly different approach to going in there. So the question with regard to, well, what do I have that these other people don't? I don't know. That's what we need, but you're there. Yeah. So the question should be, who is there listening? And what value do you want to give them? Yeah. And then you find the people who need that value, who want and would appreciate that value. You may have to let them know that value even exists. Maybe they don't know. So we have to ask, why are you passionate about it? Start by sharing your passion, because chances are others don't have that.
And I love what you just said, because I think that's very powerful. Why do you have passion over that? Because, I think what, makes us all human beings is that we're really hardwired to want to find our value
Yes.
outside of ourselves. We want to belong, we want to matter, we want to feel validated, we want to feel heard, we want to feel seen, we want to feel understood. So when so that's our automatic focus, is how am I going to feel valued because I need for them, right? As you said, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, I need for them to think I am worthy, right?
Yes.
Right. So the shift that you're pointing to, which I think is really important, is I need to tune into my own passion. I need to tune into my own why, as far as why am I delivering this message? Why do I feel it's important for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you work with your clients, is that a distinction that you talk about, kind of putting the focus off of trying to influence or control how other people view us versus getting our own value and worthiness from within ourselves?
Frequently, yes, because even the most confident leaders in a technical space
Mhm.
often fall to pieces when they have to do public speaking, for example.
Yes.
They
Mhm.
have to, whether it's virtual or in person, whether it's internal, an all hands kind of event, or they're going to speak on television or at a conference on a panel. That's a very different space. And then suddenly that fear of judgment
Yes.
comes, and the need for validation, approval, et cetera.
Yep.
Of course, there's a lot riding on it. Your reputation, you're representing the company, all of those kinds of things. So there is pressure of different sorts. But the mindset shift from what if, worst case scenario, fill in the blank,
Mhm.
to how can I serve? What mattered to me?
Yes.
And where can what do I wish someone had told me when I was sitting out there in the audience? Maybe last year, maybe 10 years ago in my career, maybe something else. Because if you felt it, thought it, needed it, wanted it, wished for it, would have been served by it, so will most likely everybody else. And they will
Mhm.
be so glad. It's like the person who's afraid to ask a question because they don't want to sound stupid, only to realize that 90% of the audience or the class or whatever else
Yes.
has the same question and is equally afraid to ask it. And when you ask it, everybody goes, thank you so much, because I
Yes.
really want to know that too.
Right.
So we just have to put away that fear. And I think part of what I try to teach is how to ask those questions, how to raise those issues, how to share those stories of vulnerability, sharing those stories of a time when I made a mistake and had to fix it, et cetera, but sharing those stories confidently.
Yes.
And that's a very big challenge for some people. It's like, well, how do I tell people when I screwed up and say it with confidence? Like, what, that seems to be a disconnect. But it's just owning, it's saying that mistake didn't define me, but it helped me become who I am now. I learned from it. And I want to teach you the lessons I learned so that maybe you can avoid making that mistake and you can learn from it too. I'm not ashamed of making a mistake. I mean, who doesn't make mistakes? You have to own that, but show that you're mature enough to learn from it and move forward. That's what leadership is about.
Absolutely. So along those lines, so how did you get your start in doing what you do? And what have been the biggest mistakes or the biggest failures that have helped you in your journey to be where you are today?
There's a lot packed in those. So as mentioned, I think earlier, I like to call myself an accidental entrepreneur and a recovering academic. So I was a teacher originally, and then I went I was a university professor, and that's where I thought I wanted to go with my career, the tenure world, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then I realized the tenure track really wasn't for me. There
Mhm.
was a cultural distinction that just didn't really fulfill and wasn't a good match.
Yeah.
But I still love to teach. And training and coaching is teaching, just in a different context and
Sure.
different content. And the shift came, I had just finished my dissertation for my doctorate, and I was at somebody's wedding. and at the wedding reception. And this is one of those moments where, what do they say? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Mixed with a good dose of the chutzpah to take the opportunity when presented and the vision to at least recognize it in the first place. You can't leave those details out of the recipe.
That's right.
But I was talking to someone at the reception and he asked about my research, just general conversation. And he said, I've always had an instinct and an interest in what you do, but I never had the data to back it up. You have the data, and I think it's relevant. Would you want to come into a training for my team? And it turned out he was the vice president of government programs at IBM. And poof, I had a contract doing some consulting work for a Fortune 50 company. Now, ironically, in case that wasn't enough, I had just thought, well, that was a neat little happy accident. About 2 months later, an equally serendipitous conversation happened when I was teaching at the university part-time, and someone from Chase Bank called the university and they got redirected to my number instead of where they thought they were going to.
Goodness.
And as I understood what he was looking for, I said, well, here's the number that you should be calling. Here's the questions you should ask. And if you get the answers you're looking for, very happy to have helped. Have a nice day. If you're not quite satisfied with the answers that you get and you're looking for that someone to bring a program to you, call me back. And long story short, I had a 4-month gig with Chase. And it was like, okay, I think this is the universe saying, once is a happy accident, twice is more than a coincidence in my book. And I loved it.
Yeah.
That was the great part. It had everything I was looking for. It was creative. It was autonomous. It was challenging. It was lucrative. That never hurts. And one thing leads to another and you go, okay, I think maybe this is where I belong. So I stayed teaching part-time for about 5 more years, just as kind of the anchor.
Yeah.
While trying to figure out, because the universe did stop raining Fortune 100 companies into my lap. So then it became a matter of, now what? How do I do this? And that was where the journey really began, and the learning curve, or the learning cliff, as it were.
Yeah. So that is super important, what you just said, right? That you stayed. It wasn't what you wanted to do. You had a vision for what you really wanted to do. And that in between, right? Where the universe is not raining opportunities on you. That can evoke a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt in all of us, right? Was there ever a point where you had this vision for yourself about what you wanted to do, and you doubted that it was ever going to become a reality, that you could actually leave the career of teaching and go into what you do today?
Yeah, for the first 5 years that I was doing it, because the marketing and sales and all of those kinds of things was not something I had any training in.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where when you have a general skill set, and not that what I had was general, but it's applicable in many ways. And the 2 companies that had come to me first both asked me for rather different things. And so I thought, well, there's so many things, like a lot of new entrepreneurs make the mistake of saying, well, there's lots of stuff I can do. What do you need? I'll do that. I'll be anything that'll get revenue coming in the beginning. And that's okay to some extent, but you can't build a company on that. It's not possible to market and, hey, I can do anything for anyone in the broad universe of this kind of space.
Yeah.
So, but I was very afraid to pick one and say, I'm going to only offer these services to these kinds of people, as opposed to those services to those kinds of people, when I was perfectly happy with the money, regardless of which, my mortgage was going to be paid, regardless of which revenue stream it came from. And I didn't have enough of a track record to say, well, 90% of my revenue is coming from this side, so let me cut off this other space. I was trying to chase 2 squirrels.
Yes.
And that's not sustainable as a business model. But I was afraid to cut one off. I realized one was had more prospect for lucrative, sustainable business, but I knew the other space better. I had more experience in the other space.
Mm.
So it was really this tug of war, and I waited way too long to let go. And then finally, about 5 years in 2013, the universe gave another sign and said, actually, this is the direction you need to go. And that's when I finally decided to fish or cut bait and made a shift
Wow.
officially,
Yeah.
rebranded the company, redid everything, and launched in a new and more focused direction. But that was terrifying because not only did I shift gears, that's also when I finally left teaching at the university and just went full out entrepreneurial, hung out my own shingle and said, okay, there's no basis for at least every month I know that my mortgage is going to get paid, kind of stability, minimal though it was enough.
Yeah.
And now that safety net was gone.
Yeah. So you lived in this sort of unknown place for a while, right?
Yep.
And you allowed fear to navigate your choices and your direction for a very long time, which I think all of us, especially those of us who, are building our dreams, can, really identify with this idea of just sitting in that fear and being so afraid to, as you said, cut bait.
Yep.
What did living in that fear for all that time teach you?
There's a lot of gray on the spectrum between being responsibly cautious and thorough in before making a big decision, especially one that has a lot of repercussion coming to it one way or another, and just being utterly risk averse and refusing. There comes a point where you're just dragging it out and you've done all the research you can, and you can always find somebody else to give more information and somebody else who will say A and somebody else who will say B. If there's not a clear consensus about which inherently is better, at some point we have to trust ourselves.
Yes.
And just and I've made plenty of wrong decisions along the way and been mad that I wasted money on this particular person or service or team or program or something that was supposed to yield great results for me and did not. And of course, recognizing whether it's because it was the wrong program, it was the wrong person, or I just didn't fulfill my end of the bargain. I have to recognize where that responsibility lies as well. But it is really difficult, I think, for us to own when it's just time to pull the trigger and make a decision. Or if nothing else, we have to acknowledge that this is why we're not making the decision because we just we're afraid to. But otherwise, it's just time to go.
Yeah. And all of those past mistakes that you look back on. Oh, I can't believe I wasted money here and this didn't turn out and this didn't pan out. Do you now have a sense that all of that was in some way perfection for your journey that you're creating right now?
Meaning it was me using perfectionist tendencies as an excuse to not do something, or that it just helped me to hone and perfect where I am?
Yeah, I think that I can certainly relate to your journey in that I've made a lot of mistakes. I've had things that have not turned out. And looking back, I can actually see that the places that did not turn out the way that I wanted them to actually were propelling me towards what was next. And that is still continuing to this day along this entrepreneurial journey. See, I think the thing that you're speaking about is this, that we want certainty and we want clarity. And it's very difficult to make a choice when we don't have that. So I'm curious, first of all, how you navigate that, and then how do you navigate that with your clients when they're in uncertainty about, just the direction that they're headed in?
So as far as my own, and they're like, that was one of those high school history essay questions. It's like, there are only 3 questions in
Part
this test.
A, part
Yeah,
B,
but
part
each
C, part
question
D.
has like 19 subparts. So
Yes.
help me break down. Where do you want to start with this?
Well, it's funny. I do that sometimes because I think there's an underlying thread that ties it
Sure.
all
And we're kind
together,
of,
right?
we're building the plane mid-flight in the question. That's great.
Exactly. So whether it's our clients, whether it's us, there is something that's really valuable about understanding that we cannot eliminate fear. And so
Oh, sure.
therefore, right? So the ultimate question I'm asking you is, how do you do this in your own entrepreneurial journey? And how do you help your clients to stand in the fear, the uncertainty, the lack of clarity, and yet to keep pushing forward?
So my clients are different from yours, of course. All of my contract work indicates explicitly I am not a medical doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist. So there's a very clear line of demarcation in the kinds of things I'm going to help them with. Under the broad umbrella of executive coaching, I will often say that my work, of course, being in the leadership communication and influence space, means I'm not going to help them make one blessed business decision. So
Mm-hmm.
whether to jump ship or not jump ship, whether to do that's not my space. But when you've made those decisions, I help you get the buy-in you need to get the results that you want. So to the extent that I have a client who, let's say, needs to speak to the board, they're going to present to the board of directors, or they're going to pitch their business to a big group of investors looking for some sort of private equity capital or venture capital or something like. There's lots of different challenging spaces. Maybe they're going to be in on television on some news clip. So there's lots of things that are going to bring fear, but it's rarely a situation where they're going to come to me and say, should I do it or not?
Mm-hmm.
It's, I need to do this. Help me knock it out of the park. And it may be, I'm confident in my role as chief whatever officer. I'm terrified to go and speak here. How do I not sound stupid? How do I do it in a way that I'm not projecting all of my fears? How do I do it in a way that's more the space that I get. It's about, so what's the difference between fear or about being fearless and being courageous? Mm-hmm. Fearless is having no fear. No one is that. Right. Courageous is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So that's what I help them with. And what it comes down to is recognizing that when you think about the qualities that we want to project to others, so anybody out there can say, I want to come across as someone who's confident, someone who is empathetic, somebody who is engaging, somebody who is, whatever adjectives you want. Mm-hmm. All of those qualities are subjective interpretations of our objective speech behaviors. That's the geekiest I'll get on you today. But meaning, what does confidence look and sound like? Yes. What does empathy look and sound like? Because to that audience, those qualities may differ. If I'm talking to you and your audience, Joanna, then it's different from if I'm doing a guest lecture at an undergrad college class of freshmen, something or other. I'm going to speak a little bit differently. I'll use different stories. I might dress a little differently, just tweaking it in order to sound relatable to them versus to somebody else. So still being me, but adapting. Right. And so thinking about, okay, maybe I can't hide that I'm nervous speaking in this space, but I do know that, okay, what projects nerves? If I fidget. So, okay, I have control over fidgeting. I'm going to try not to touch my face too much, not to play with my hair, not to click the top of my pen as I'm talking. All those little, often unconscious physical behaviors that telegraph uncertainty. Maybe I know that using too many fillers is another sign of nerves or uncertainty. So I'm going to avoid or really be mindful to not use a lot of ums, uhs, likes, so's, you knows, I means, and all those other icky things that punctuate our talk. Maybe it's a matter of, I know when I get nervous and my adrenaline kicks in, I start talking really fast. So I'm going to have decaf in the morning,
Right.
and I'm going to work to talk really slowly, recognizing that what feels unnecessarily, or not unnecessarily, but unnaturally slow to me,
Yeah.
when mixed with the cocktail of my adrenaline that's kicking in, is actually going to sound perfectly normal to everybody else. So I have control over those behaviors to
Yes.
not telegraph my nerves. I'm not faking it. This is no fake it till you make it. There's nothing fake about
Right.
this. There's no reason that I would walk up and say, "Hi, everybody. I want to introduce myself to you. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola, and I just want you to know first and foremost that I'm really intimidated, and I don't want to be here, and my knees are shaking, and I'm kind of hoping I don't throw up before I'm done. Nice to meet you. Let's get on with our top." Like, why would I say that? Even if it's true, that's not authentic. That's TMI, and that's total self-sabotage.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if I wouldn't say it verbally, why would I want to telegraph it non-verbally? I have control over that too. They don't need to know that. They'll know what I want them to know.
Right.
And I will communicate that through all channels.
Okay. So if we were going to leave the audience listening today with, like, let's say the top 3 things that they could do to command their presence, what would those be?
The first would be to think in terms of what is the impact that you want to have on your audience, your listeners. So if you want them to be encouraged, if you want them to be curious, if you want them to be excited or feeling more confident in knowledge about something, okay, start with that end in mind. That's your GPS destination for your conversation. Now build what you want to say with that end in mind. How can you give them that gift? Approach from that perspective.
That's great. And do you have people just focus on that one person that they can find value with, as a that they can provide value for, as opposed to the 500,000 people that they're speaking to? Is that a useful thing for people to just focus on that one person?
Are you talking in a live auditorium of sorts versus in a virtual like this? If so, it really depends on who the audience is and what you're looking for. My personal effort is to try to make sure that everyone in that audience feels like I'm just talking to them.
Wow.
And that everybody in that audience, at some point, and of course, if there's 1,000 people in the room, I can't necessarily make eye contact with each of them individually, but I'm going to try. And for each person that I make 5 seconds of eye contact with, I want them to know that I see you.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. I'm here to give value to you.
Yeah.
I hope you find value in this. That is my goal. And so when I come and I try to connect with them from that point of, I want to give you a gift, and I leave it at that, I think that the audience feels that. And I would encourage people to do that more specifically, instead of just really homing in on what, I mean, if you have a plant in the audience, you've got a friend or somebody you've met, and that's your encourager, so to speak, sure, find them again. But we still want to try to touch more areas of the room so that the whole audience feels like you're addressing them as well.
That's great. And speaking of gifts, you have something that is a valuable gift that you want to share with the audience today.
I would love to. Thank you. Yes, I have it's a very simple 2-minute leadership communication and influence self-assessment. It's a quick quiz to help everybody out there take stock of all the different kinds of contexts in which we want to influence people, which we maybe never thought about as active contexts for influence, and to see, okay, where am I really awesome? Where am I strong? And where, gee, maybe this is holding me back. I never thought about it. If I want to feel confident, get away from that inner critic and allow my own strength to shine and my service to be available to the world, where do I need to get better at that? So it'll help you take stock of all those kinds of things and prioritize what you want to work on first for your sake and for all of those that you serve. So I'd be happy to share, maybe in the show notes, we can share the link to that survey. And totally free. Would love to invite your audience to participate. Thank you.
Fantastic. And where can people who would like to know more about your services, how can they find you?
They can go to my website, which is laurasicola.com. Not very cryptic. You can also, of course, reach out to me on LinkedIn, both my personal and business site. And we are also on all your typical social media platforms from Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, et cetera. And of course, I've got a podcast as well, which is Speaking to Influence. So
Great.
would love to connect with your audience. And if you're reaching out to me personally on LinkedIn, please let me know that you heard me here on Joanna's show. And that helps me know how we met and how to connect.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here today, Dr. Laura. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I loved every minute of it.